ES1, welcome to your next English lesson where we focus on the private reading project and the investigative approach. Just as a reminder then of our plan, last week we looked at skimming and scanning and organising information. Today we're going to focus on flow diagrams, timelines and comic strips, and next lesson we'll look at labelled diagrams and maps. Following on from that, we'll look at how to research information and putting that research into your own words. And for researching information, we'll go back to our skimming and scanning techniques that we practiced. And then after that, we'll be discussing our topic for investigation and completing all the research into the topic before actually working on your presentation. Just for a starter though, same as previous lessons, I want you to go to the quiz that's on nouns, verbs and adjectives. It's out of 10 and it's self-marking, so I want you to complete that and add your score into the box. So pause the video, do that now. Moving on to private reading then. Now, if you were part of the starter where we read a story together, you could just simply add in your information about that story. Or if you've been reading other short stories or novels, you can put the information into your private reading notes. Now, I'm aware that some of you have filled out the private reading notes for all your texts, so I've just put one slide on this time. Please remember to write the title of your text and add in your information. If you think you've finished, you could just use this bit to maybe describe a different character other than your main for one of your books or short stories. Or you could just write on this page that if you look at previous OneNote pages, you should be able to find all your notes. So pause the video and take between 10 and 20 minutes to just work on your private reading notes. Moving on then to the S1 investigation. And remember, in this topic, we are selecting and finding information. We're organising information and creating new texts. We're also working on our presentation skills, and this is with the science department, so we're also looking at interdisciplinary learning. We'll start then with how to present information in different ways. So we organised our information into a table last week. Now we're looking at the different types or different formats we could use for presenting information. And we're going to start with a flow diagram. So a flow diagram is a way of presenting information in a series of steps. So for example, you would use a flow diagram to give instructions, to show things that have happened over time, to show a process, or you could use it for decision making. And if you notice on this page, there are some pictures of what flow diagrams could look like. So some of them are a wee bit different from others. Some of them look a wee bit squiggly. Some of them have got little yes or no, and then if you follow the yes, you go to one stage. If you follow the no, you go to the other. But they can also be much more straightforward as well. How to create a flow diagram then? Well, I thought I'd put it in a flow diagram for you. So first of all, you read and watch and think about the information that you're going to talk about. Then you're going to decide on your key bullet points. Then you're going to put the bullet points in the order. So if it's instructions, you want it to be from the start of whatever you're instructing someone to do to the end. If it's to do with time, chronologically. And then finally present the information as a flow diagram. So just as a small starter, I should have said, please make sure you've got a bit of paper or a jotter and a pen or a pencil, or you could use Word. It just takes a bit longer, but if you go into Smart Art Graphics, if you go down to the bit that says Process, you could do a flow diagram in there. And what I would like you to do is create a flow diagram to show how you get started for the day of remote learning. So imagine an alien came down and said, what is remote learning and how does your day start and how do you get there? So right from the moment you wake up to the moment you start watching this lesson and doing the work, and what are all the steps in between? So I would like you to put that in a flow diagram just now, please. So pause the video, do that now. So remember, I want you to think about all the different steps you take from waking up to logging onto your first call and doing your work. Once you've finished, I want you to upload a photo, if it's on paper, or a screenshot of your diagram, if you did it on Word, to the next slide. So if you can insert your flow diagram here. We're now going to look at creating a flow diagram from information. So what I would like you to do is read the passage on the slide and on a bit of paper or on Word create a flow diagram to show what happened. In 1912, Captain Scott and 4 other British explorers set out to become the first men to reach the South Pole. They reached the pole only to discover that a Norwegian explorer had got there before them. On the journey back to their home base, the weather became very severe. It was bitterly cold and they were sweating a lot because they had to drag their sledges with them. Their sweat froze and their clothes became wet and they didn't have enough fuel to dry them out. Cold, damp and tired, they all died. So they're very unlucky people, unfortunately. So what I would like you to do is pause this video. Remember that this passage is in your OneNote slide, so you don't have to have your video in front of you on pause just to read it, okay? And I want you to put what happened to Captain Scott and his friends into a flow diagram. And remember, it can be on paper and Word. On you go. And just like before, I want you to insert your flow diagram in here. Now brace yourselves for my amazing artwork. Going to move on to look at comic strips, which is a more informal way to present information, but you could look at comic strips as very similar to a flow diagram. So if you look here, this is one for Red Riding Hood, in case you're wondering. And it says at the beginning of the day, and there's a mum talking to Red Riding Hood, and it says, "Go see Granny." And then as Riding Hood had started her journey, she meets a wolf that says, "Hello there." And she says, "I'm off." What does she say again? "I'm off to see my granny." And then in the next bit of the comic strip, it says, after taking a different road to pick some flowers, which if you remember from one version of the story, the wolf convinced her to do that. She knocks on the door and there is the wolf dressed as Granny, and she says, "Is that you, Granny?" And obviously I left it there because I'm sure you're too blown away by my amazing artwork. So, comic strips, if you think about it though, they're almost like a flow diagram but with the pictures as well. So what I want you to do is read the Captain Scott passage again, and this time put the same information about what happened to Captain Scott and the British explorers into a comic strip, and then insert it into this site. So pause the video, do that now. Let's move on then to timelines. Now timelines, again, can look a bit like a flow diagram, except there's usually one line rather than lots of boxes. And they're specifically for things that have happened within a period of time. So for example, maybe moments in a person's life. So you might find a timeline of a famous celebrity. Key moments in a day, a week, or a year. So for example, you could have a timeline for your birth apart timetable. So you could have on Monday, I cover English, then, or well, if you were an SE, you would cover English, then this, then this. On Tuesday, I cover this, then this, then this. And so you could have that as a timeline. Or it could be a plan for the year ahead. So it doesn't have to be something to describe what you have done. It could be a timeline of what you plan to do. Okay, so you hear a lot about like roadmaps to recovery, for instance, and roadmaps can be very similar to timelines. So people want a timeline of when all things COVID might end. And so you might put a plan of action into a timeline. They're usually horizontal or vertical, but sometimes they can be a bit more squiggly. And if you remember, you've got a BGE roadmap, which shows you all the things you'll cover in order along the year. And if you notice that timeline, we've stuck to it pretty well, even under lockdown for S1. And so you'll be able to see after S1 investigations, what is it that you do next? So let's think about presenting information using a timeline. What I would like you to do is pick a day from your week, could be weekend, and create a timeline to present all the things that you did that day. Your timeline can be in any direction. I think the easiest is always vertically. So that's when the line goes from the top of the page down to the bottom, right in the middle. And then out to the side are the little bits to do with it. 7 a.m, this is what happened. At 8 a.m, this is what happened, and so on. Or, if you would prefer, you could use a timeline to present information about a famous person's life. So you might look up even just Wikipedia, because it's just practicing the skill. So you could look up Wikipedia about someone like, I don't know, Taylor Swift, and go to the early life bit and right up to career, and you could do a timeline to show all the important bits in her life, for example. So pause the video and do that now. And again, it's probably easiest to do it on a bit of paper, but you could probably do it in Word, or even you could do it on OneNote and just using your finger to draw. So there's loads of different ways you can do it, as long as you do it and then you insert a picture of it into the slide following this one. Here's an extension then. You do not have to do this, okay? But if there's anything in science this week that you could have presented as a flow diagram, a timeline, or a comic strip, can you just do that now and add your picture in there? You don't have to do it, but it's just extra practice, and bearing in mind your investigation will be based on the work that you're doing just now in science. So let's go over today's lesson then. We looked at nouns, verbs and adjectives. We've looked at private reading, and if you were in with Mrs. Hamilton, you'll have done some extra reading of a story as a class. And then we've looked at presenting information in flow diagrams, comic strips and timelines. For next time then, I want you to continue to read your novels and short stories and keep adding to the notes pages. Bye for now.